Brilliant. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm sure you've been, like me, probably online all day in hopefully not as dry meetings that I've been in all day. So thanks for sort of spending the time, and I just hope it's going to be useful. And actually, I'm just going to jump straight in because actually I've got some really interesting, I hope, and useful things to share. So let's just get straight to it. And let's make the hour really useful. And this is, I guess, the first question that I want to air, and it's are you playing to win? Because, and I know this because I've been through the process myself. Unfortunately, there's only one real great outcome of this process, which is winning. And I'm a massive believer that if you're playing to win, you need strategies and plans that are winning strategies and winning plans. And I really want to help you get some really tangible things in your toolkit and adjust your mindset slightly to be able to play to win. And I hope that it gives you the very best chance at what is a fantastic process to go through, and the fruits of it are just incredible. And I'll tell you a little bit about my story in a second. This is what I'm going to take you through, and it's going to be fast paced. I'm going to talk quickly. Pop things in the chat if you've got questions, and I'll tackle them straight away, or we can leave some time at the end. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I'm going to tell you about my win as a sabbatical officer. Then I'm going to talk around self-leadership and the things that you can do to arm yourself to go out and do the best that you can do. And this is really how you look after yourself and ensure you give yourself the best chance. And then we're going to tackle some personal brand stuff and some really tangible top tips to finish off. And so I hope that sounds like a good agenda. It's practical and it's fast, and I really just hope it's helpful for you. So a little bit about me. My first job was in a Chinese restaurant, and this is an actually remarkable picture that it looks like me when I was that age. Difficult picture to find. Pictures of someone like me working in a Chinese restaurant is quite rare, but I loved my time in there, and I spent years working there, and I learned a hell of a lot about efficiency, about time management, about hard work, actually. And I always remember thinking, there's no career prospects here for me, but what I'm learning is actually something I'll take into the future. And I really do think this process you're about to go through, if done properly, even if you don't win, actually you're going to take a lot of learnings from it. So it's important to focus on doing the best job to see what you can get from it. But yeah, limited career options. So I took myself off to university, and actually my aim when I was at university was to be a rock and roll star. So I formed a band when I first got there, and we undertook some of the cringiest band photos that you've probably ever seen. And I picked probably not even the worst ones, but why on earth we decided to try and squeeze us, there's been a bit of a fresh face. Why on earth we tried to squeeze ourselves into a hole in the wall or into a taxi, or, I mean, how many people do you need in a phone booth, really, is beyond me. But that didn't work out, and you'd know if you'd heard any of our music. It didn't work out at all. And I decided that actually I wanted to do something creative, and I wanted to do something with purpose. And I met my now wife in a bar at university, and she was doing a job, and she was a sabbatical officer for the Students' Union doing communications post. And she was leaving that job. And I thought, wow, that sounds like a good thing to be doing. I thought I'd apply. And she said, you don't apply, you have to be voted in, and you go up against other candidates, and it's very competitive. And I thought, is this for me? And I embarked there on a journey that actually the guy on my right was my usher at my wedding. I've made friends for life, and it set me up for my career. And so I know probably what this means to you in terms of how you best represent students, but I also know what a kickstart it can give you in your career and in your development. So I'm coming at this at a place of I'd love you to do well, because I know what it can deliver. And I looked after our Students' Union newspaper, and in a minute I'm going to tell you about my campaign and what I thought worked well to help you. But when I was successful, I looked after the Students' Union newspaper, and it was very unsuccessful. I mean, nobody bought a copy. I mean, it was free. Nobody picked up a copy. And it was through that process of really trying to get students engaged in what we were trying to give them that I actually discovered the love of marketing and communications. And so I went off into a career which leads me to where I am now. I'm Deputy Director of Marketing at the Prince's Trust, which is a UK youth charity set up by His Royal Highness Prince of Wales. I run a team of marketing and digital experts, around 20 to 30 of them across the UK in all different regions and countries. It's a fantastic youth charity, and I'm very, very lucky to be leading their marketing team. And I run a business called Hack Yourself, which a lot of that is why I'm here today, actually. So that started off with a book. So I've got a book out at the moment, which is a modern career book. It's all about tips and tricks of how to thrive in the workplace, in what is a very changing workplace. And it was from there that I then set up a company called Hack Yourself. And we essentially train businesses on modern leadership skills, what it takes to be a leader in the modern workplace, from C-suite execs right the way through to entry level. And it's some of that stuff that we've been learning and delivering with global businesses that I've extracted out, repackaged, and I'm going to share some of the bits with you today, because there's some leadership capabilities that I think are essential for you to understand to do really well in your campaign, but also that I think will be useful for you when you go on and into your work. So what I'm hoping is from today is what you'll get is some practical things for your campaign, but also hopefully some useful lessons as you hopefully enter the workplace in the years to come. So my win, as I say, this was me, looking very fresh-faced. What made my campaign successful? I'm going to share probably top 4 things here, and then I'm going to talk about the leadership stuff, and then I'm going to finish by some practical tips that wraps it all up and some extras on top. So just for starters, the thing that worked well, and I'm very conscious that this was a number of years ago, and things change, and we're doing it purely digitally now, so this is very difficult. But there are some common themes that don't change, and the first is that you are not the audience. And having worked in marketing now for a number of years, it's the golden rule in marketing. When you're trying to sell something, a product or a service, is to know that you are not the audience. And actually, the audience is probably very, very different to you. They look different to you. They feel different things to you. They want and their needs are very different to you too. So understanding this is so crucial, because there will be limited amount of people that could vote for you that are exactly like you, that you may relate to. And so it leads you to this point, which is the bit that I think I've done well, which helped me essentially win, which was bring people into your campaign team that are diverse. And I was lucky I had a very diverse friendship group of people that from different cultures, different backgrounds, that can help transfer the message and the meaning of what I'm trying to do to the groups and people that I can't easily reach. And if you can bring people together to help you get your message out, it will serve you well, and you'll have a much better chance of reaching a mass market. So get used to the fact that you're not your audience, you probably don't understand them, and you need people around you that can help you. So who do you have with you? How big is that group of people? And how ready are they for the campaign that is about to come? The third thing for me, which was, again, almost like a kind of a light bulb moment for me, which was most people will not vote for you that you ask them to, unfortunately. The sad thing is that a lot of people don't care as much about this as you do, or I did. They need some convincing, and often, out of 100 people you may reach, 10 may vote. And so the math says of 1,000 people you reach, 100 may vote, and on and on and on. Your job, I feel, is to look at mass reach. Where can you get the biggest reach, the biggest awareness of what you're trying to do? Because, as I say, not everyone you speak to will vote for you, and I managed to do that. I worked very hard to get a lot of people understanding what I was there to do. And then the fourth thing, and I know you're on tight deadlines for your manifestos and your hustling speeches and all of that sorts of stuff, but there's still time to refine. And the thing I would say, which is so important, is pure simplicity of message. What is the number one thing, we're going to come on to this shortly, but the number one thing that makes you stand out from the competitors? You're a product. The product is you. People are thinking, should I buy you or not? And they want to know why. And what is the one thing that is on your package, on this busy shelf of people, that will make them choose you. Simplicity of message. I'm going to come on to that shortly. So let's jump into some of this self-leadership stuff. Leadership of other people starts with leadership of yourself. So in a workplace scenario, I'm going to bring this right back to you and your campaign, but in a workplace scenario, it's in my view, and in the many sort of global businesses we work with on leadership, trying to lead other people is very hard unless you're able to lead yourself. Understand yourself, know what you care about, be self-assured, be confident, because then you can influence and then you can communicate. And so understanding exactly what you're about, particularly when you're doing your hustling stuff, particularly when you're writing your manifesto and when you start your comms and your digital campaigns, you have to have a real concrete understanding of what's going on with you. And so I'm going to give you two chunky things now that hopefully will help you and be useful for your future career too. So let's jump in. And I'm going to start with a story of self-leadership gone very wrong, actually. So this is me when I was, I think I was about 14, and all of my photos of this period of my life, I've mainly had my eyes shut, as my mum would always be frustrated by. But this was me when I was 14, and I was lucky enough to be signed on a professional football contract for the Ipswich Town Football Club. And as a young boy, I had my heart set on becoming a professional footballer. Everything about it was my dream, and I spent every waking hour trying to make it happen. And my dad and I, we drove many miles all around the country for many years doing just that, trying to make it happen. There comes a point in a young footballer's life at that standard where you have your conversation, and you drive up to the football club and you sit in the chairman's office with the head of the youth academy, and the conversation goes one of two ways. You either get the yes or you get the no. The yes is when the contract kicks in, the money starts kicking in, there's a future, it's going places. The no is you're out, it's over. I want to take you back one full year before that conversation happened. And our team started to lose. And we started to lose 1-0, 2-0, 3-0. And I found an old notebook, I'll show you it. I'd written down every single score that season. We lost 6-0, 7-0, 8-0. And on it went. And one by one, the confidence of the people in that team started to fall. Like a domino effect. The confidence, their ability, their skills, their performance. And that certainly hit me. And one by one, we essentially crumbled as individuals, and we lost for a whole season straight. So let's fast forward through that year, driving up to the stadium with my mum and dad. I remember being sat in that chairman's office, and I got the no conversation. Absolutely heartbroken. I had 1 week left on my contract, and they said you could either play the last game or we can part ways now. And on the very long journey home, I even remember actually as we got in the car home, the keys were turned in the ignition, the song that came on the radio is Britney Spears' Hit Me Baby One More Time. I don't know why it's relevant, but it's a vivid memory. But on the long journey home, we decided we would play the final game, and it was at home to Fulham. And I remember being sat in the changing room with the blue and white kit on, and the Fulham coach came in. There'd been an accident on the motorway, lots of traffic. They'd arrived with only 10 men. The game couldn't go ahead unless one player from the Ipswich side would go and play for Fulham that day. So I volunteered, and I was yanked out of the Ipswich changing room and plonked in the Fulham changing room. And I remember take off the blue and white kit and put on the black and white kit, and went out and played for Fulham that day in front of all the parents of all the lads that I'd obviously played with for many years. And I say this in the most humbling way possible, but I played the best game of football that I have ever played and will ever play. And I remember walking off that pitch to a standing ovation of all those parents, and got signed there and then by Fulham on a 6-month professional football contract. Now, I'm not a professional football player now, clearly, But there's been one question for many, many years that have been troubling me, and I mean really troubling me, niggling me at the back of my brain for a long, long time. And that question has only been recently, actually, I've been able to articulate to myself the answer to this question. And here's the question. What is it that takes you from that poor performance, that year of losing, underperformance, to peak performance, playing the best game ever in an instant? What can take you from underperformance to overperformance in an instant? Poor performance to peak performance in an instant? And the answer that I've come to articulate and understand is mindset. It's this ability to tune into your skills and your abilities, regardless of the poor performance going on around you. Okay, that year of losing, that domino effect, that poor confidence, regardless of the mediocrity, the poor performance around you. How can you tune into your mindset, tune into your confidence and your skills, and execute and do what you can do? And when you enter the world of work, here's a sneak preview for you, but there's a lot of idiots in this world and they've all got jobs, okay? And they'll be in the workplaces and there'll be mediocrity, there'll be poor performance. Your job is not to level down to them. Your job is certainly not to under par, to go below peak performance. Your job is to do the very best that you can. And in your campaign, in what you're about to do next, the performance of people around you, your peers, your competitors, what they did last year, what they did 5 years ago, what I did, whatever, that is not your benchmark. Your benchmark is what you are capable of. What can you draw up from yourself? Let's put COVID to one side. Let's put everything that is pressure, that is challenge to one side, and tune in to what you can do. That's self-leadership. That is not about following the crowd. That is about saying, I'm going this way and I'm going to be doing this very, very well to the very best of my ability. And you know what? I've taken that mentality with me throughout my whole career now, that only my best is good enough. And by understanding actually some of these drivers and where they come from in your life, it can be incredibly powerful. So I wanted to firstly land that with you about self-leadership, that don't look around what other people are doing here, okay? I want you to switch off from what other people may be doing. And now, from this point onwards, to start thinking about what is my best here, because you do not want to be sitting in that room, getting the no answer, looking back over years worth of performance and thinking, maybe it could have been different. So on that election night, let's hope it's going to be different for you. So it will be for some of you, but not all of you. So the first thing on self-leadership that I want to land with you is probably one of the most transformational leadership development exercises you can do for when you're in the workplace. And I'm going to sort of take that basis of that and use it with you for what you're doing in your campaign. It's going to work really well. This isn't something you're going to be able to do instantly. It's going to take some thinking outside of this, but I'm going to cover it. You can take it away and have a think. The values are, it's a bit like this race here. There's many people all going in the same direction, just like you. They're all going to that finish line. But actually, they're all very different people that have got there in many different ways and stand for many different things and care about many different things. And you often back the person that is more open about these things, that you can relate to more. And so by understanding the things you truly care about, and I don't mean your campaign messages, I don't mean housing or well-being, as important as they are. I'm talking about the things that, as a person, what do you care about? Okay, and you know, I can send this around afterwards actually, but there's just a list here that that often I use with clients of mine to help them navigate through picking out words that they can align to their list of values. Because once you get say 4 or 5 of these that you really relate to, so you can start crossing these off and saying, actually, yes, commitment is something I care about, or creativity. So creativity is one of mine. As a child, the things I did when I was most creative, the things I enjoyed the most. Through my career, I've plotted my career. The jobs I loved the most, I had the most creative control. The jobs I hated the most, the ones I had least creative control in. And so I know creativity and guitar on the wall. I try to do a few creative things here and there. Creativity is part of what I care about, it's what I stand for. And once you can identify these, you start to get a little bit of self-assurance. You start to know, okay, if asked, I can talk about the things I really care about, the person that I am. And this is brilliant, by the way, for job interviews and stuff. When you go on, when they say, tell us a little about yourself, a well thought through answer that says, really care about these 5 things. I care about collaboration, learning, creativity, and courage to really do my best, for example. And then when we train real senior leaders, when they lead teams and stuff, they lead through their values. They're really open about what they care about, and it really connects them with their team. So food for thought there in the workplace, but back to you with your campaign. I would really go through this exercise, especially about you, really understanding what you care about, brilliant for your hustling. But then it's about the things you care about, what you really value in relation to the student experience. Because you'll have your manifesto things, but I would really encourage you to just whittle that down to the things you really care about that match up with your values as a person. And you can say a much more compelling story, deliver a much more compelling message when you link it back to what you care about and what you value. And this is about self-leadership. This is about understanding yourself and saying, this is what I care about, and this is what it means to you, and this is the value that it can add to you as a student, and this is why I want you to vote for me. So I'll send this out to be emailed to you, a list. You can get lists of values and stuff online. Go through, strike out the ones that don't relate to you, bring the ones that start to sort of feel right, put them in a list, start refining them down until you get to a point where you really feel comfortable with them. And they're your values, and then do that also for the things that relate to students too. We're going to come back to this in a second because I want to just touch on the next one, which is, and if any questions in the chat as we go, which is about purpose. And by purpose, I mean this. I mean, why are you here? And I know you probably drafted, hopefully you've drafted your manifesto and what you want to achieve. But I'm asking you a little bit of a different question here, which I'm hoping is going to make you rethink some of your manifesto and refine it slightly. But I'm asking you absolute clarity of why you're here, distilled right the way down to the smallest amount of words possible, because soon you're going to be digitally campaigning, and I don't know how many words your manifesto is, but no one's going to read it other than the real keen beans, and they'll vote anyway. Everybody else is going to want a really pithy expression of why you're here. And so these questions can help prompt some responses, but the way I take our clients through purpose, and I get them to do it in a workplace scenario. So if you're a boss, or if you manage people, or if you're in a project team, whatever, getting them crystal clear clarity of your purpose is really important. But for you, what I would do, and you don't need this grid, you can get a blank bit of paper, 4 boxes, very quickly start, and I've chosen the word because and to really deliberately. I'll tell you why in a minute. Quite quickly, choose four answers of why you're here. I'm here because of, I'm just going to guess this, but you care about because of the student experience. I'm here because you want to support students during COVID, for example. You're here because of tuition fees. You're here because, I don't know, you want to improve the nightlife when you return to it, whatever it may be. Get the 4 big ones down that are coming out of your manifesto. And then start to summarize it into the soundbite, this memorable soundbite, which is your motto, which is about, I'm here to what? What are you here to? And, to summarize those 4 things I've just said, it might be something like experience, education, and costs, for example. I'm here to represent experience, education, costs, whatever it may be. But that's the thing that needs to be really, really memorable and really, really crystal clear. And so do this. It's a real challenge, but do this. Really try to distill it down to see how far you can get it, so that it becomes something that is your the basis of all your digital comms going forwards. And there's nothing better, honestly, than knowing your values, which is covered, what you care about, knowing the things in the student space that you really care about, and then being able to articulate exactly why you're here, what it is you're here to do. And coming from from a marketing perspective, leading marketing teams, clarity of these things when you're doing communications is what makes campaigns work. Otherwise, they're confusing. They've got to be crystal clear for you, before they're crystal clear with the audience you're trying to serve them to. Okay, I'm going to touch on some personal brand stuff now, before we hit some really tangible tips. And I was asked to cover some bits on personal brand because it kind of brings together what I've covered. The values and the purpose is the foundations of a personal brand. A personal brand is all about establishing and promoting what you stand for. And by what you stand for, I mean values and your purpose. And a combination of your skills, your experience, your personality that you want followers to see. This is about the perceptions you're trying to build of yourself. And so what I'm going to cover now, again, is useful for your campaign, but is very useful for when you move into the world of work too, about making sure you've got a good personal brand. As much as you choose to deploy that, that can work in your favour. So the essentials of personal brand are going to pop up one by one. I'm going to cover them off quite quickly. Add any questions into the chat and I'll try and answer them as we go. So essential number one, start with the end in mind. Now you know what you're trying to achieve, you know where you're trying to get to, but what are the perceptions that you wish people to have of you? And link that back to the things you care about and why you're here. Really be clear about that so you can start building your personal brand with the outcome in mind. Number two, know yourself. This is just a deep dive into the values. That's where it comes into the personal brand, really knowing yourself, the clarity of purpose, which is covered, and demonstrate value. So a personal brand that's effective has to show that they can be valuable to other people. Otherwise, you're quite a kind of passive entity. So when it comes to energizing your personal brand for your campaign, always remember that there needs to be some element of the value that you can add. So if you think of yourself as a product, a cleaning product to remove stains, if that cleaning product doesn't clearly tell you and remind you all the time that it is the #1 cleaning product that can get red wine stain out the carpet or whatever it may be, how would you know that that's the value that it can deliver? So think of that cleaning product when you're writing all your digital comms and stuff. Think about the impact, the value that you can have. It's really, really important. Great personal brands are really clear about the value that they can have. The next point of view, if you'll just blend in really, unless you're willing to stand out. Okay. So what is from the things that you care about, the value side of stuff, and the content of your manifesto, I would get a blank piece of paper and I would write 5 bullet points of your point of view. A point of view is obviously something that is very different to other points of view. Otherwise, you're just summarizing the situation. And that is what can be in your toolkit for when you're doing your digital comms. You need a strong point of view for your brand to be noticed. Then obviously the content and whatever you create for your campaign needs to align to all of that sorts of stuff. Whether you're going to be doing full-on productions of videos or it's just simple copy that you're got on the website of the union, whatever it may be. But it needs to align. Again, coming at this from a marketing perspective, what I think is helpful is in marketing, you have a brand, you know what the brand is, then you know what you're trying to say with that brand, and everything you do then aligns to it. So think of yourself as a brand or a product. Being genuine is really important, and authentic. You'll hear a lot, I'm sure, but you're not robots, you're people, and showing a bit of vulnerability and a bit of honesty is a good thing. And I deliberately included that story of me and the football to prove a couple of points on this, actually, that a little bit of vulnerability, a little bit of failure, a little bit of openness can hopefully create a bit of connection that then leads people to listen a little bit more after you've shared it. So think about your authenticity, your reason for doing this. If there's anything you can share that's really helpful. And consistency is massively key on this. Again, from a marketing perspective, a brand is only as good as it's consistent. So think about consistency across the board, and I'm just going to pause very quickly to tell you and ask you something on this point. Okay, so a personal brand, the perceptions that you create will be built upon over time, but from multiple places, and particularly online in digital channels. So it's obviously very important that you don't have content or things out there online that could damage the perceptions that you're wishing to create. And so anything that you've got in mind, that you've got online that you might need to clean up, now's the time. I'll definitely do it before you enter the workforce anyway, but certainly at this juncture, I think it's an important point to make. Anything that's clouding your reputation online, it needs to be deleted. So interestingly, I was given some of your names and contact details before today's event. So who thinks the next slide is the results of some online research that I've done to try and find the very worst examples of bad content on each of you that I could find? Who thinks the next slide is the screenshots of some of that content to demonstrate how damaging it could be? Should we take a look? It's the relief emoji. It's okay. I wouldn't do that to you. Data protection wouldn't let me. But if your heart just started to beat a little bit quicker than it usually would, then have a think about what those things might be that you need to tidy up. But on a more serious note, although depending how bad your content is, that might be very serious. But on a more serious note, think about consistency across all of your channels as well. You know, if you're using whatever platforms you're using, you know, your bios on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, LinkedIn, however you're planning to do this, be really consistent. And do add me on LinkedIn and stuff, and Twitter, and you can start to see the sort of personal brand that I'm trying to create and the consistency across. And any tips for improvement, do let me know what you spot. Two popped up at once then. Show impact and build credibility. So show impact is different to demonstrate value. What I mean by show impact is, what can you actually be doing right now that is working towards some of the stuff you're promising? Is there anything you can get rolling? Is there anything you can start in motion, discussions, bringing people together, debates, that can show actually you could have a bit of an impact on this? Because there's nothing better than demonstrating what you can do by doing it to get people to vote for you. So I don't know what you're promising, I don't know what your campaigns are, but have a think, is there anything you can actually start? Because within the rules, of course, but showing impact can be very compelling for voters. And the final one, on just at the top there, the build credibility. Within the rules, I've read your rules, by the way, very good document, very long, but very important. You know, it talks about how you can get endorsements from people, and credibility is really important in certain circles. Think of those big mass market circles that I talked about, the reach. How can you build credibility broadly in that? I would think of a hit list of people that you could associate with and get on board, even your campaign team or as endorsers. And then you've got a story tell. People with great personal brands aren't static in their approach. They are very dynamic and they are very good storytellers. Think about your story. Think about the reason why you're doing it, where you're going with it, and what impact you want to have, and think about how you storytell, because people aren't going to listen to the dry stuff. They're going to listen to stories. And I can imagine that the most you've listened to me so far is when I was telling the story, because the story has a start, it has a hook in it, it has an ending, and everybody wants to get to the ending no matter how bad the story is. So think of what your story is, plan your comms in storytelling. You'll be much more likely to engage people, and think of a really good start. Always think about what's the start, and you'll know this, but in digital, you know, you're very rarely getting the last 3 seconds. So think of your opening line of that. If you think back to my story of football, I started off by saying, I'm going to tell you the story of self-leadership that didn't work. Creates jeopardy. You want to hear what happened, and then a picture of me young, what's going on. So have a think about what your story is that can engage your audience. And then you've got to show up, folks. I mean, this, I know it's the obvious, but by show up, I mean properly show up with your energy, with your stories, with a bit of vulnerability, the definition of vulnerability is about doing things where you don't know what the outcome's going to be. There's uncertainty there. You've got to go all into it, because this is the time to make your mistakes. As you move through your career, this will become a distant memory if it didn't work anyway. So the worst thing is that you're going to learn a lot, test a lot of stuff, and go for it. So you've got to show up. So be prepared to show up. And it's that playing to win. You've really got to do that. All right, I'm going to give you some top tips now to sort of start rounding off some of this and bringing it back to some tangibles. I'm going to save some time for some questions. I love this picture, by the way. It's not really related to what I'm going to talk about, but what I like about it is, for me, it's very arresting. It's quite gripping, isn't it? It's like, I always think of this picture around the risk and reward. The reward of, I think it's an alligator or crocodile. Let's say alligator. The reward of riding an alligator. Wow, exciting story to tell. The risk is the alligator bites you on the bum. So there's this balance of risk and reward. I also like the kind of, is she in danger? Is she not? Is she a wild child? Is the alligator in danger? You need an explanation, and I think I've included it for you to think about your visuals and how arresting they can be. So when you go to do your digital comms and you go to add a picture, or you start to record a video and you think about, where should I film it? Think about this picture and think about, is it as good as this picture? Is it arresting enough? Does it capture your imagination enough? Because you're going to be marketeers now for the coming weeks. That's your new job title. And great marketeers, as I've said, know their audience. If they don't know them, they get people to help them. And then they've got to be single-minded, simple, and direct, but arresting in their comms. So think of the girl riding the crocodile. All right. So you're the product. I've said that a few times. Just a reminder that this is about you. So you're going to have to be open and be vulnerable and talk about yourself. So be prepared to do that. Leverage your points of difference. Now, I imagine you're all, now this might be, I might be generalizing here, but I imagine a lot of your manifestos are very similar. For good reason. You're going to be talking about COVID and the impact on students and tuition fees and accommodation. Of course you are. You're going to be talking about well-being. Of course you are. You're going to be talking about the environment. There'll be so many common themes that are just so important. What's your difference? What's your point of difference? Because if you all talk about the same things, how can people vote? And then they get confused and then they don't vote at all. So you need to think about promoting the difference, not the same. Remember that phrase, promote the difference, not the same. So you'll have your core of what you want to deliver, but you need to then look at your USP. So in marketing terms, your unique selling proposition. Okay. So if you're an orange juice on the shelf among all the other different orange juices, there's no point just putting orange juice on the label. You have to think about what's the USP. Has it been made sustainably? Is it organic? Is it the Lucozade effect? Is it about energy? Is it fresh? What is it? What's the USP that makes you stand out? Has it got more oranges in than anybody else? I don't know. I'm not an orange expert, but I do know that you have to stand out and leverage your points of difference. So when you review your manifesto, just take literally 30 seconds at the end of it to look at it and say, what is in here that is different to everybody else? And take that and lead with that in some of your comms, okay? If it's strong enough. Of course, it needs to be a benefit to the consumer, as people need to want orange juice with more oranges in. If they don't, you've got problems. Okay, next one. Fruit, more fruit. Oranges, no. Find low-hanging fruit. So, that in obvious terms, there will be people that will vote for you that are close to you, your friends, friends of friends. In marketing terms, you sell to those that want to buy it first, and then it gets more expensive from there onwards. You don't have a budget. I think your budget's like 10 quid, isn't it? I looked at your the rules. That's not a budget. That's sort of expenses, isn't it? So you've got no money. You can't go outside. You're fully digital. Find the low hanging fruit first. The people close to you. They still won't vote. From my experience, and I've got lots of friends who've been through this process. My wife has. I do lots of work with industry unions. They still don't vote. They're too busy. They say they will. Low hanging fruit, you have to keep literally pulling it until you get it. It's in your reach, so you have to go for it. But your frequency of message is important here. Keep reminding. Don't start past the low hanging fruit, because these are the ones that you've got much more chance of getting a vote from. So focus there. Then this is really important. When you're then thinking of those outer circles of how you get your mass reach from there, who are the gatekeepers of these opportunities? And within the rules, thinking about who can open these doors to mass reach, who can get you the access to communicate with the right people that might vote for you. So this is about scoping the market. So in marketing terms, once you sold to all your customers that like what you do and are fans of you, how do you then reach the customers that are further afield that frankly are very cold to you and don't really care? Actually, they don't know they care yet. This is the frustrating thing, isn't it? That you know they should care. What you're doing is in benefit for them. They don't know they care yet. How can you access them? Who has that data? Those email lists, whatever it may be. A call to action every single time, and it can feel uncomfortable. But at every touch point, at every message, at every communication, you need to tell people what you want them to do. And I know that sounds obvious, but I've worked with people that feel uncomfortable asking people to do things all the time. But you'll get fed up. This is the ideal scenario. You will get so fed up of what you're saying and the calls to actions. Everybody else won't be. They'll just be seeing it once or twice and spotting that call to action and doing something with it. So you need to get to a point where you're so fed up of what you're saying, because it means you've done enough. But just remember, your audience won't be swamped. They really won't. I work in the charity, the fundraising team. They always say to bring the money in for donations, you have to ask people for money. You can't just talk to them, tell them why you're a really good charity. At some point, you have to say, will you donate? Will you vote for me? And I'm going to say this one again. This really, in this kind of competition, and it is a competition, I'm afraid, but it's those that work the hardest, in my experience, reap the rewards. So it's going to be a hard slog. It's purposeful. It gives you something to get stuck in these frustrating times. Don't be afraid of that, and see how hard you can work. Because I've also found that going through my career, after going through being a SAB, is that it almost set my standard for the working life. How hard I work to get those votes and do that job, I've carried through to my career. So start as you mean to go on, and it will put me in good stead.